Thank you, Madam Chairman. We're now live streaming.
Thank you, Teresa. A warm welcome to you all at the first council meeting of 2021. For your help and information, and for all those joining us online, using my discretion as chairman, under Standing Order 5.3.1, I am varying the order of business as follows. Questions on notice, which on your agenda is item 6, will be taken after item 3, and the questions will be taken in this order. Councillor Burt, Councillor Clark and Councillor Morton, who has 2 questions. Thank you, Julie. Could we have the roll call, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Ashby.
Present.
Mr. Askew.
Present.
Mr. Atterwill.
Present.
What they intend there, Stephanie, is that the people are...
Mr. Bambridge.
Present. With my shadow.
Yeah.
Mr. Burt.
Yes.
Mr. Borrett.
Present.
Councillor Bowes.
Yeah.
Mr. Brame.
Present.
Mr. Brindle.
Present.
Miss Bushell.
Present.
Mr. Carter.
Here.
Councillor Marion Chapman-Allen. Mr. Sam Chapman-Allen.
Here.
Mr. Clark.
Present.
Mr. Clausen.
Here.
Mr. Coleman. Mr. Cowan.
Here.
Mrs. Crane.
Present.
Mrs. Dale. Mrs. Dowling. Mr. Duffield.
Here.
Mr. Dygan.
Here.
Mr. Eagle.
Here.
Mr. Gilbert.
Here.
Mrs. Gray.
Present.
Mr. Harvey.
Present.
Mr. Hewitt.
Here.
Mrs. James.
Present.
Mr. Jeremy.
Here.
Councillor Cadell.
Here.
Mr. Kiddle-Morris.
Present.
Mr. Kybird.
Here.
Mr. Ian Martin. Mr. Keith Martin.
Here.
Mrs. Monument.
Present.
Mr. Morton.
Here.
Mr. Nairn.
Here.
Mr. Nunn.
Morning.
Mr. Oliver.
Present.
Mr. Robinson.
Present.
Mr. Sherwood.
Present.
Mrs. Suggett.
Present.
Miss Taylor.
Present.
Mr. Terry.
Present.
Mrs. Turner.
Present.
Mrs. Webb.
Here.
Mr. Wickerson.
Here.
Mr. Wilkin.
Here. Heard but not seen.
Mr. Wilkinson.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Julie. Do we have any apologies, please?
Madam Chairman, I have apologies from Councillor Coleman, Councillor Dale and Councillor Ian Martin.
Thank you very much. Right, the next item.
Sorry, Chairman.
Sorry.
Could I add
Councillor
apology, Councillor Dowling, please? I know she was unwell. I'm not sure if she'd be able to make it, and I know that she's not here.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, moving on to the minutes on your agenda. Just bear with me while I get them up. Right, we have the minutes of the council meeting held on the 10th of December. May I have a show of hands if you are in favour of those minutes being passed? Please raise your hand clearly if you are. Any against? Any abstentions? Councillor Jones, thank you. Okay, Julie?
Thank you.
Right, declarations of interest. If any members have any interest to declare, please do so now or at appropriate time if it comes up later on, and at that point you'll be moved to the waiting room. Thank you. So now I'm going to move, as I said, I've varied the order of business to items which are questions on notice under standing order number 6. There are 4 questions. Every member has had the questions and the responses, so I don't intend to go through those again, but I will invite the 3 members who ask questions, if they have one supplemental question, to the member responsible that is in the same topic as their original question. I hope that's clear. So I'm going to go to Councillor Burt first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly concerned yet again that the answers here are being slightly obscured to any members of the public who would be watching now, in that they will not be released, the question and answer, until after the minutes are produced. And it would be useful, I think, anybody attending the meeting from the public who could actually see this. And if anybody wants a copy, I've got copies of them. I'm happy to distribute. So, to fill in the detail, the member for contracts and assets seems to have wriggled and squirmed a bit on my question.
Councillor Burt, I'm allowing you to ask one supplemental question, not to make a debate of it.
No, I have to frame it because they're not published. Unfortunately, if the questions were published, it would be easy. So the member for contracts and assets seems to be having a problem accepting that he cannot unilaterally declare that funds from the sale of the Green Britain Centre will be reinvested back in Swaffham. As usual, the financial affairs of this matter are murky, or at least not being disclosed, and I think anyone can draw their own conclusions from that. The veil of financial competence seems to be falling from the ruling party. And
Councillor Burt, I'm going to stop you speaking in a minute. If you cannot ask a supplemental question, I will not let you continue in this vein.
I've got there. I had to frame it. Would the member for contracts and assets disclose the exact value of our investment and how many millions of pounds have been lost in this sale?
Councillor Hewitt.
Really? Forgive me, I will now frame my answer, Councillor Burt. My response to you, I thought, very clearly asked the precise purpose of your question. So your follow-up question suggests either you didn't hear it, you didn't read it, you didn't understand it, or what you really wanted was an answer to another question, which with respect has got me thinking not as to what you are asking, but why you are asking it. And in particular, why you're asking this question now in a public forum in the way that you are. Because it seemed to me, Mr. Burt, that the response you've just received has not embarrassed me or embarrassed this council enough for you. So let me explain my thinking behind the comment in the press release and my understanding of your reaction to it, as clear as I possibly can. We have disposed of a building that has been an iconic part of the Swaffham skyline, a building that in its prime brought employment, visitors and income to the town, a building that for 2 years has been empty, and for 18 months we have been seeking with the town council to develop a vision of a community and a leisure offering that is more suited to the town and to its aspirations, but a vision now that has been dashed, albeit for a positive reason. As a result of the sale, we can offer employment and growth to the town, but the town in turn now needs to seek an alternative location for its vision. And in the press release that you referred to, and my guess, although I can't quite work it out, in your follow-up question, I said, I believe we can help. As a council, as councillors, as part of the wider Breckland community, I believe we can be, we should be, and we collectively want to be a part of that vision for Swaffham, wherever we live and whatever patch we represent. This is not a political question. This is more to the point that actually, by sharing the resources we collectively bring, we can help other people, Mr. Burt, because it strikes me that the underlying purpose behind your question seems to be that if you cannot be linked directly to a part of a vision, nobody should share in it. With respect, Mr. Burt, not every piece of news revolves around you, no matter how it might sometimes be reported in the EDP. Sometimes I think as a representative of the wider district, you, Robert, William, Rodri, Sam, Roger, we all should celebrate in the success of other people and other communities, because I see that as part of our role, part of our elected mandate, to build up our communities, not just to knock them down for the sake of a few more column inches. So if you're asking for me to apologise for supporting the economic aspirations of a town, I will not. But there's a world outside your window, Mr. Burt. If you want me to apologise to Tim Ure for misquoting him, then I will. I would suggest if you've got a real question, you put it in writing and I will respond in writing.
Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. Councillor Burt, I'm not going to continue with you. Councillor Hewitt has offered further responses in writing, and that's what I'm asking for, because under this item you're only allowed one supplemental question. I think you've asked it and you've had the answer. So moving on to Councillor Clark, please, with his question. Do you have a supplemental, Councillor Clark?
A very brief, short and relevant question, you'll be pleased to hear, Madam Chairman.
Good.
To the Executive Member for Planning. Thank you very much for your response, which was much appreciated about the Chairman's panel and a review of it. I would just gently say that whilst members of the panel can contribute their individual views back about any review, when they take part in the panel, that's about individual cases about whether they're referred to the committee or not. So I would just gently ask that any thinking that is going on between the chair of the planning committee officers and yourself as executive member for planning is shared at the same time with members of the planning committee who can give their views and experience and bring it to bear. And I'll finish on that. But thank you for your response, Councillor Clausen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. So I'm guessing, Councillor Clausen, there is no more to say on that one.
Didn't sound like a question, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to move to Councillor Morton, who has two questions in. Councillor Morton, would you like a supplemental question on your first item, which is to Councillor Alison Webb?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would. I hope the application for funding is successful, as I feel it meets the criteria of the government scheme. I am concerned, however, that if it isn't successful, we are in a position to learn from it and I would ask the executive member for housing to confirm we will be in a position to support a further bid through the local energy hub scheme.
Councillor Webb.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morton, for your question. Yes, I agree with you. I hope it's successful as well. Every time that we apply to different applications for funding, if we're not successful, which we are quite a bit, I will be honest, but if we're not successful, we always look at the application and ask for feedback and why we're not successful, and so that we take that learning on for the future. And we've been very successful in the past with it. Obviously, I was going to say, looking forward to other schemes that are coming online, and everyone will be reviewed, it will be looked at. If we feel that we have capacity, resources, we stand a very good chance and it's going to be delivering benefits to our community, we will definitely be applying for it. Please be reassured that we do not lose opportunities of applying for funding where we know it's going to benefit our communities. So thank you for that question. As I said, as soon as we get a result, I will be in touch with you, Councillor Morton. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And your second item, Councillor Morton, is do you have a supplemental question for Councillor Ian Sherwood?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I do. I note we have a carbon audit report which is coming out shortly, and this will probably look into the position on charging points. But I would ask the executive member for sustainability to take a lead on this and adopt a rapid programme for installing EV charge points, as it's critical to give people confidence to purchase electric cars.
Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Morton. First of all, with your supplementary question, you've given me an opportunity to issue a slight apology. I did say at Cabinet that the carbon audit report would be out with members last week. Unfortunately, the officer and I spotted one or two typos and some broken links in the report. So we've just asked the publisher to correct those, but it will be out very shortly. In relation to your charging points, you know, and I continue to thank you for your ongoing support for the Green programme, that we will ensure that we're in the right place at the right time, and the team are working on looking at all those options. So thank you very much, Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. That's the end of that item. So I'm now reverting to the original agenda. So the next item is Chairman's announcements. As we continue to work our way through this pandemic, I wish to record our grateful thanks to all those who've kept our services going for our communities. As Chairman, I've had many thanks from members of the public who have been grateful for a grant, for information, for reassurance, and for their bins being emptied. In addition, following our Christmas efforts, we've raised over £1,400 for the DAISY programme in Watton. On a sad note, I have to share with you the death of 6 people who in different ways have been associated and worked with our council. Their families have been sent a letter and a card of condolence from me on behalf of you all. Former councillor and chairman Paul Ison, who was chairman from 1983 to 4. Former councillor Jill Ball, all of us that knew her would remember her feisty methods. An officer previously working with us in Breckland and at South Holland, Glenn Chapman. PC Colin Lake, known to many in Dereham. Emily Millington Smith, MBE, a pioneer in championing a voice for older people in Norfolk, who was instrumental in supporting the Breckland Older People's Forum. And Linda Hinu, who was secretary to our own Breckland Older People's Forum and the Dereham Windmill, and she's been latterly responsible for the county-wide newsletter from the Norfolk Older People's Strategic Board. And hearing news this morning from one or two of you of others who are very close, very known to you all. Let's remember everyone who's known and unknown to us. So I will now time a minute's silence. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Just a couple more items. Training. There are a number of online training opportunities for members, and I'd encourage you all to have a look and take part if you can. Finally, the Vice Chairman and I are attending a number of civic events, online obviously, to keep a healthy and informative connection and to keep raising the profile of Breckland Council with other authorities and agencies. And that's the end of my announcements. Now we'll move on to leaders' announcements, at the end of which you may ask questions in connection with his report, and that time limit is 30 minutes. Over to you, Leader.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. And as it is our first meeting of 2021, may I wish you all a very belated Happy New Year. Unfortunately, 2021 has begun much like 2020 ended, but with the vaccination programme now in full swing and people continuing to abide by the national lockdown guidance, I'm pleased to say that 2021 is beginning to look a lot brighter. That said, I'm aware that local flooding over the previous weeks has impacted many residents across Breckland, and my heart goes out to all of those who've been affected. Just a reminder, Chairman, that if there is an immediate risk to life, residents must dial 999 and get the support of the blue light services. However, I would encourage people across Norfolk, if they've been affected or impacted by flooding, to report this to Norfolk County Council as the lead flood authority at norfolk.gov.uk, and it allows them to build up a picture of issues which are occurring and the mitigation requirements, if they are required, to be rolled out. And of course, the support Breckland's offering to residents and local businesses is ongoing and unwavering, much as you mentioned in your opening address, Chairman. And of course, we are continuing to work closely with our colleagues in the National Health Service and Norfolk Public Health to share information about the vaccine rollout, local testing, guidance, to ensure that residents and our loved ones are safe. In relation to the vaccine rollout, Chairman, this is being led by the National Health Service and Norfolk CCG. We have several GP sites within Breckland stood up already vaccinating, and they're doing sterling stuff at a local level. And we're waiting for our first large vaccination site to be rolled out across Breckland over the coming weeks, and there'll be further vaccination sites over the coming weeks and months also, ensuring that we're vaccinating those who are most vulnerable in those priority groups, and of course, the rest of society. If anybody does have any questions or concerns about the vaccine rollout, they should visit norfolkandwaveneyccg.nhs.uk. But I ask, Chairman, that people do not contact their local GP practice to arrange their appointment. Someone from the health service will contact you when your appointment is ready. As a district council, we're taking the lead on so many activities which are making a massive difference to local people's lives and their livelihoods. For instance, I'm delighted to say that we've now issued around 10,000 individual grants to district businesses affected by this pandemic, with more grants being provided every single day. And of course, businesses can contact their local members, ourselves, if they need further information, or contact the council via our website. In total, Chairman, £35 million worth of grants have been awarded to Breckland businesses, ensuring that they are protected and supported, and there's going to be further money over the coming days and weeks. In addition to the local and national grant funding we've distributed, I'm highlighting that this council's earmarked over £1 million for investment into our market towns and our high streets into this year to support those businesses to bounce back from what has been the hardest set of financial issues they've faced. In terms of supporting our communities, Breckland officers, including our fantastic COVID support officers, are helping to deliver that local enhanced track and trace system, which involves speaking to residents on their doorsteps, making sure that the contact's been made, making sure that those who have tested are provided the support they need and are following those isolation rules and being compliant. And doing so, Chairman, we are helping stop the spread of the COVID virus within our communities. Since the 15th of January, we've already carried out over 60 visits, in addition to offering that wider COVID advice and support. And we've already taken the opportunity to refer a number of individuals for further welfare support, which our elderly and most vulnerable residents in particular can be vital. This welfare support, Chairman, includes financial aid, access to those essential supplies, loneliness befriending support, and of course, mental health advice, guidance, and of course, transport options if required to get to local vaccination centres to receive their jab. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the community, whether you are paid employment, volunteers, or looking after neighbours and friends. Without your support, we would not be able to protect our most vulnerable. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind members that as part of our response to the COVID, our local community hub is still operational and can provide local emergency food parcels, food bank vouchers, register vulnerable people for delivery slots at their local supermarkets, and even local hardship grants, which this district council stood up. So if residents in your ward, Chairman, are struggling, I urge you as members of this council to make them aware of the vast array, but ensure that you are feeding that information directly into this council. While our COVID response is clearly top of this council's priority, I'm pleased to say that across the board of essential services we're continuing to deliver, we are continuing to deliver at pace, with about 85 to 90% services being run at full capacity. And I'd like once again, Chairman, to note the thanks on behalf of myself and all members for the council officers who are continuing to work in some hard and difficult conditions. These are excellent examples which show once again that Breckland remains open for business and we have a bright and growing future ahead of us. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Leader. If you would like to ask the Leader any questions, please raise your hands clearly. And I have Councillor Jeremy first.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Sam, for the update. I wanted to ask a question on flooding, if I may, and I was pleased that you mentioned that. Firstly, thank you to yourself and the team that managed the emergency line, both of which took my call on Boxing Day evening, so I'm very grateful for that. I appreciate it's not the best time for flooding, but we flood on Boxing Day as well in Thetford. I wanted to ask specifically about sandbags, because there's been quite a lot of confusion about the provision of sandbags. I must confess, I was always on the understanding that provision of sandbags was a county function, although in response to a cabinet question that I submitted recently, I've been informed now that it's a district council responsibility, which was news to me. I wondered if you could maybe update us, because obviously with the river levels as high as they are at the moment in Thetford, I'm getting requests again, you know, what if it gets worse, where do we get sandbags from? And if we're not clear, perhaps we could issue some guidance on that specifically moving forward, please, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader?
Lovely, thanks, Councillor, and thanks to yourself and your colleagues across the Thetford area who are supporting residents impacted by the flooding over the Christmas and New Year period. So Breckland does have a stock of sandbags. It is fair to say that they were depleted at pace during the festive period, that all those stocks have now been replenished. I would encourage residents who feel that they may be impacted by flooding to get onto the environmental DEFRA website from the Environment Agency to see if their area is at risk of flooding, and in turn they can then the EA will then issue on their website a helpful checklist for what residents may need to do to prepare for possible flooding. And part of that, one of those checklist items is to purchase and obtain your own sandbags, or to use earth soil bags for that defence. Of course, if there is immediate risk to life or property, of course, as I said earlier, it's a 999 and the blue light services will come out and support. And of course, what you did, Councillor Jeremy, contacting the council, will be able to offer that local advice to residents, businesses, and yourself as a ward member as to what we can do to support those individuals. So I hope that does respond to your question there. Just to follow up, if I can, Chairman, of course, when there is any incident or emergency, part of that is the recovery and the wash up. Mr. Rob Walker is leading on that with officers across the district, and we're making sure that all of our processes and procedures which occurred over Christmas and New Year are and were fit for purpose. And if there are any improvements which need to be made, they'll be made in the wash up, which is occurring at pace. And the action plan, I think, is due to be finalised and signed off at the end of next week, with all of those being boxed off as well.
Thank you, Leader. I have Councillor Clark next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is actually a favourable comment to the Leader on the comment, which is really just to say, can I please publicly again thank Breckland Council and Councillor Webb, because the Leader did refer to grants to different organisations in the pandemic. As a result of the pandemic, the Mid Norfolk Food Bank has had to increase their space because of the extra demand, but also for spacing out for their volunteers under making things COVID secure. They did find additional space, but I'm very grateful to, as many people are, the 2,000 families that they support and the volunteers of the food bank for the very generous additional donation of £2,500 that Breckland announced on Tuesday, in addition to the generous donation of £10,000 earlier, and this now latest donation matches the £2,500 that Breckland Town Council has done. So it's really just to say, look, thank you for that, and that's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Leader, do you want to come back with any comment on that?
Only to say, Chairman, thank you for your question. I completely agree that it's a really positive piece of news. Breckland over this year has supported organisations such as the Deer and Food Bank with tens of thousands of pounds for those in hardship, and the council will continue to support those who are in need. And I think that it just goes to show that district councils and all tiers of government have a really important part to play to support their communities and businesses.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the question I was going to ask initially was actually asked by Terry. It was about sandbags and flooding. As you may know, that in Watton we have a flood action group. It's actually the Watton and Saintoni Flood Action Group, affiliated to the National Flood Forum. We work independently of the council, but with their support. We were under the impression, and I am a member of this group, that Breckland were not supplying sandbags. It's good to hear that we have a strategic supply. Having a strategic supply is very good, but if you don't know where to get them, there's not a lot of use sitting in a warehouse. Can the leader, Sam, let people know where these are? Are they available in each of the towns or in areas which are more prone to flood risk than others? Because it's all right having a warehouse full in Dereham if you're flooded in Thetford or in Watton and you can't get there to get them. So can we have some sort of indication of where these sandbags are locally, in local depots in towns or somewhere, so that people know where to go?
Leader?
Lovely, thanks Councillor Gilbert, thanks for your question. That type of operational detail, I don't know the specific location of sandbags throughout the districts. What I do know is that I'm sure, like yourself, Councillor Gilbert, I've signed up to the Environment Agency flood alert system for every river across the district, and I get phone calls at the most bizarre times of the evening at the moment, and that will alert me to when we are either in an amber, a yellow, or moving into a red. Now, that exactly the same alert system works for our emergency planning officers at Breckland, and as soon as they're made aware of possible risks to flooding or other incidents across the district, they can then mobilise and work out where they need their resources, either resources as sandbags or resources in manpower, respite centres, hotels, bed and breakfasts, etc. So that is a really clear process. What I would ask, though, Councillor Gilbert, being an experienced councillor which you are, if you are ever concerned about anything involving emergency planning, contact the office during the working hours, or contact, like Councillor Jeremy did, the out of hours team, and the duty officer is activated. They're on call 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and they will then be able to allocate that resource to where it is needed most. In relation to sandbags, you're absolutely right. As I mentioned earlier, that stock was depleted over the Christmas and New Year. We are waiting for further stocks to come into back to the right level. And as I said, part of the wash up through the Christmas and New Year will be to review what is our stock holding requirements across the district.
Thank you, Leader. If I could just add to that, as a ward member, those of us across the district that have got our own emergency plans within our villages or towns, that has proved to be so worth its weight in gold during this situation, because immediately there's been an issue, whether it's the pandemic or a flood, or in Shipton we had a bomb, major fire, that committee goes straight into action. We publish our plan in the local parish newsletter. We work with the emergency planning officer at Breckland for updates. We have a supply of kit on standby to help people if needed. So it's just worth everyone just thinking about how can we be a bit more resilient around where I live? Because a lot of it has to be our own responsibility. Thank you. I have Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask the leader if he could provide or point me to where the figures might be in terms of how much work we're doing on test and trace and how efficiently it's being done in terms of contacts determined.
Leader?
Lovely, thanks. I haven't got the detail to hand, Councillor Morton. I will seek support from our public health colleagues at Norfolk County Council and our localised track and trace team to see if we can provide something which is of use to you to be able to undertake your role as a councillor and to reassure your community.
Thank you. I have no other indication of people wishing to ask questions. Is that right, Julie, Teresa?
That's correct, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. We'll now move on to item 8 on your agenda. And you will notice now that the minutes for 4 of the committees are now as part of the agenda. What I'm going to do is take each one in turn and ask if there are any questions from the floor to the member responsible. So I'm going to start off with the cabinet minutes.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt, Chairman. I think we were just dealing with questions in respect of the leader's announcements. So I think we may have skipped past item 7 on the agenda, questions without notice.
You're quite right, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wouldn't manage without my team behind me. The trouble is, if you looked at my desk and my ironing board that's at my side with all stacks and stacks of papers, even the best of us can get it wrong. But we're all human. Well, most of us. So I'm going back to item 7, questions without notice. Hands up. I have Councillor Jeremy first, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to go back to a question to the leader, please, on grants, Sam, which you touched upon, and your sort of praise of the team that are handling them and the sheer quantity that they are distributing. Now, of course, it's much more complicated because there are different tiers, different amounts, and it's a very confusing picture. I just wondered, Sam, if you could reassure us that the team managing this have sufficient capacity to distribute the grants in a timely manner. I have spoken to a number of small businesses in Thetford who are obviously concerned. These grants are an absolute lifeline to them, and I want to be sure that the council has enough staff to deal with these in a timely manner and in a way that gives the necessary reassurance to local businesses, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader?
Lovely, thanks, Councillor Jeremy, for your question. It's one of the points which I pick up with Max and Rob 3 times a week at our gold meetings to talk about resourcing across the organisation. They have daily meetings with their team to look at resources within every service area. It hasn't yet been flagged with me, but as per the first wave, we will pivot and move resources across the authority to ensure we're getting it to where it needs to be the most, to ensure that we're protecting both residents and businesses alike. If you are aware, anecdotally, Councillor Jeremy, of any issues or delays, please do contact the regeneration team on the generic email address, or as a member, of course, you can raise that with the relevant officer directly or via myself, and I'll look into it on your behalf.
Thank you, Leader. I have Councillor Burt.
Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 questions. The first one for the leader, and I'd say that perhaps for many months now we've been unable to agree on a lot of issues, but I hope today that we can actually find some common ground. So, would the leader agree with me that employment is the best way out of poverty for most working age people? And therefore, would the leader agree that having work close to where we live benefits both the employee and the environment by reducing travel? I have a second question afterwards, perhaps, which is probably more difficult for the member for customer engagement.
Okay, Leader, do you want to take the first question?
As in relation to the first question, Chairman, you're absolutely right that getting a job, a career, and a better career is the way out of poverty for everybody across not just Breckland, but the entire world. In relation to locality of employment, it linked into residential locations. I think there is a mix. People have the right to live where they choose to live, and we shouldn't curtail or restrain that. But likewise, through our planning system and our local plan, we must ensure that where we're placing both growth sites for employment and residential sites, that they're intrinsically linked, not just through their close proximity, but also the ability through public transport and walking and cycling as well. And as you're aware, there were some of the comments which this council fed back in the white paper consultation late last year, and previously the comments I've made to the Right Honourable Christopher Pincher, the Minister of State for Planning, via the DCN and the LGA to ensure that those two items are linked. I don't quite know where Councillor Burt was going with this question, but I think either through choice, individuals have, but also for the planning system to make sure where those large growth sites are, Chairman, we must ensure that they are intrinsically linked.
Thank you. And your second question, Councillor Burt?
Thank you. It's nice to be able to actually agree with some things. So for the member for customer engagement and climate, late yesterday, I received the draft copy of the carbon audit. It was quite late and I had some other things on, so I haven't been able to read it thoroughly. However, I'm slightly concerned, and I appreciate this is a draft copy, that the report actually seems to be making decisions rather than setting out our position. For example, on page 5, it says waste collection fleet was recently reviewed, so it cannot and should not be tackled until the late 2020s. Well, I think with reports like that, we need to be looking at evidence and not discounting views at a carbon audit stage. Now, I've checked the document as well, that I have the most up-to-date draft copy, and it was produced on the 15th of December. So I'd like to know, having been pressing for so long to get hold of this document, why has it taken 5 weeks before we can even see the draft?
Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, Councillor Burt, for your questions. In relation to the first part, the report is to inform and advise and help guide all councillors on what is one of the most challenging things for any council and society as a whole to deal with over the coming decades. So it's not decisions, it's advice and care. Why has it been delayed? It was published and it came in over the Christmas period, and I accept that. And like most people, I took a break over Christmas, as did many other people. The officer involved with looking at the initial report and myself also identified some typo errors and some link errors in it. So we have asked for the company to correct those. So it will be going out to all this week. So those are the reasons, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. I have Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. This is a question to the leader. He may choose to delegate it. It's coming back to flooding, which, as we know, doesn't recognise administrative boundaries or any others. Does the leader welcome the decision of Norfolk County Council Cabinet in their new flood management strategy, 11th of January, which asked a question about, which is re-establishing partnerships with districts as part of the strategy? And will he agree to commit resources and effort to working with county, ensuring that all councils in Breckland are able to contribute input to this, but also where we have our own powers to look at things like blocked up ditches and culverts, we will exercise them where we can. Thank you.
Leader.
Lovely, thanks, Chairman, and thanks, Councillor Clark, for your question. I'm aware of the document. I haven't seen it myself yet. We've got a Norfolk leaders item being raised in relation to flooding across the district, working with the EA, Anglian Water, Essex Water, and other key partners and organisations. The fallout from that, Chairman, I'll be more than happy to share with colleagues as and when that happens, and how Breckland and its members can engage proactively to ensure that we're protecting both residents and businesses.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Brindle and then Councillor Attewell. If anybody else wishes to ask a question, please raise your hand so the officers can capture it and let me know. Thank you. Councillor Brindle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a question, I think, for the leader, because you spoke about the river system in Thetford a month ago and commented on the improvement Breckland was bringing, which is great. And I'm pleased to hear that amongst those things is likely to be a jetty built on Breckland land on the river in Thetford. Can you confirm that it will be open and free to all Thetford residents at all times, please?
Thank you. Leader.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm not aware of the conditions in detail in relation to that access permit granted by our assets team for the jetty itself. I know that the business owner was trying to ratify some insurance-related matters to understand where the insurance risk lay with that if members of the public were using that jetty and sadly injured themselves. But I'm more than happy to respond to him and other Thetford members after this meeting to get some clarification as to what the final outcome of his investigations were with his insurance company.
Thank you. Councillor Atwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two quick questions. First one is for the exec member for planning. Do you think that the Building Control Department is sufficiently resourced at this time to best serve the district?
Councillor Clausen.
The simple answer to that is that we're out into recruitment at the moment, as we speak at the moment. So at the moment, until that recruitment exercise is complete, I would tend to agree with you, Councillor Atwell.
Thank you. And your second question?
Second question is for Councillor Hewitt regarding the Green Britain Centre. Will you commit to providing members with a financial report detailing the original capital outlay for Green Britain Centre and the subsequent capital receipt that we've realised by its recent sale?
Councillor Atwell, Councillor Hewitt's had to leave, so I'll hand it back to the leader.
Lovely, thanks, Chairman, and thanks, Councillor Atwell, for your question. As you know, Councillor Atwell, I think we've got some 240 assets across the district and surrounding areas that the team at the facilities acquire and dispose of them on a regular basis to ensure that we're getting the best revenue stream to support and protect our frontline services. In relation to the Green Britain Centre, that was, of course, a decision taken by the Cabinet member in consultation with the local ward members, and I'm more than happy to follow up with the relevant information to reassure him in relation to its acquisition and subsequent disposal.
Thank you, Leader. And then I have Councillor Terry.
Good morning. Question for Sam. As a school governor, I'm concerned about food poverty and how it impacts upon children's education. It remains a major issue in our district, and so many families who are eligible for free school meals do not apply for them, often because they do not realise that they are eligible. Is there anything that Breckland can do to help encourage people to sign up for free school meals so that those who are eligible do not miss out?
Leader.
Lovely, thanks, Chairman. So, of course, Her Majesty's Government has awarded tens of or hundreds of millions of pounds to upper tier authorities across the country to support food poverty, and Norfolk County Council is doing that at pace, as well as their Norfolk Assistance Scheme supporting those individuals and families across the county who are impacted by the current pandemic. In relation to, I've got dogs squeaking, I haven't got children in the background, Chairman, I promise you. In relation to the free school meals for those individuals who are impacted and aren't taking them up on that offer, part of our vulnerability support network, Chairman, is the officers asking those type of questions to understand what their needs are and making them aware of what is available to them to date. I know that Norfolk County Council has re-advertised the food hardship scheme for those school children prior to Christmas. It's something I can raise with the leader of Norfolk County Council again, and I will ensure that through our vulnerability programme and our own comms team, we're raising awareness of how families can sign up to the free school meals scheme as well, not just for now, but into the future.
Thank you, Leader. And again, speaking for where I sit as a member, we work closely with the head teachers of the school near us. So if we have any information that we think will be useful for the schools, that they can then cascade it out to their families, that's one good way to do it. I haven't got any other names on my screen. Oh, Councillor Wickerson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. Question for Councillor Sherwood with regards to the climate change situation. I likewise have received a copy of the draft report. It's very detailed, and I understand it's going to take some time to plough through that and look at all the points and the recommendations, including our carbon print output. However, at a previous meeting, we were advised that the climate change officer had been appointed, and that in due course we would receive some details about that individual, like an introductory email or message from that person, which we have not received. Can Councillor Sherwood just assure us that that information will be forthcoming, as it is a very, very important post, obviously, and it would be nice for members to know who's been appointed, credentials, etc., etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Yes, I can assure you of that, Councillor Wickerson. I thought it would be unfair for the applicant to not get his feet under the table. So his first few weeks have been getting to know exactly what we expect him to do. I've had a number of conversations with him, and very shortly that information will be coming out. But I thought it'd be a little bit unfair in his first weeks to have an inbox full of questions before he became familiar with Breckland as a whole. So yes, you will get that information, and I'm sure he's looking forward to being in contact with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. Officers, do I have any other members wishing to speak? I can see Julie shaking her head. So now I'll move on to item 8. I won't repeat what I said about the minutes before, but we will now look. You've got the cabinet members for the 4th of January. Are there any questions to the leader? I can see no hands. Thank you. The second one is Overview and Scrutiny Commission from the 3rd of December. Do we have any questions for Councillor Oliver? I can see no hands. The third one is Governance and Audit Committee from the 17th of December. The recommendations within those minutes will be taken under items 9 and 10. But are there any questions for Councillor Borrett? I see none. And finally, the Planning Committee minutes of the 14th of December. Any questions for Councillor Wilkin, who is now with us on screen? I see no questions. Good. So those minutes are there for your noting. So I'm now going to move on to item 9, the annual report on the Treasury Management Service and actual prudential indicators. And Councillor Cowan to present, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, colleagues. As you've just heard, these two reports relate back to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting under the previous item. Both of the reports were debated fully at that committee meeting on the 17th of December, and as will be apparent from the minutes that have been published, there were many questions that were asked on both of those items, and they were answered fully, and questions were satisfied. Accordingly, Governance and Audit, as you can see from those minutes, have recommended various recommendations on both sets for Council to adopt. The content of both of those reports is somewhat technical, and as a mere councillor, as opposed to an officer dealing with day-to-day accounting matters, I'm going to hand over to Ali Chubbuck to deal with. But one thing that does come across loud and clear in both of those is the significant reduction, both now and looking ahead, on investment income, which shows that interest rates are likely to be held at 0.01% for some considerable time to come. And speaking privately, I've just had a note from my bank to tell me that my wonderful savings accounts are being reduced to 0.01%. So for every £1,000 someone may have sitting in a bank, you get 10 pence a year. It's a great way of storing your money under the mattress. It might actually save you buying a new one. So without further ado, can I pass on, please, Chairman, to Alison Chubbuck, who can fill any particular detailed questions that you might actually have. And once we've gone through that, we will take the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Cowan, just to be clear, so we're talking about both items at the moment?
Yes, please. Items 9 and 10, they both form part of the Governance and Audit Committee minutes, and both of them are coming forward to the Council to endorse the recommendations.
That's right, but when we get to the recommendations, I will do them separately. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, welcome, Alison.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Cowan has said, these have been discussed at Audit Committee. In summary, the first report, item 9, we didn't breach any limits, we didn't have any borrowing, and we complied with all our requirements. So it's a good news report. And item 10, the policy and strategy is unchanged from the current year because it's fit for purpose. And again, as Councillor Cowan said, that was fully discussed. So I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Alison. Right, please raise your hand very clearly if you'd like to ask any questions. Councillor Burt.
Thank you, Chairman. It's more a statement than a question, because I have engaged with this previously in the other committees before, but accepting that the world is in a very difficult place at the moment and there is going to be ongoing financial turmoil. You know, we can see that we've got some difficult decisions to make, difficult times ahead, especially with our capital reserves. I note on page 66 of the report, though, that we're looking at revenue funding halving, and this was before COVID. So just wondering whether we've actually set ourselves up correctly in the first place. But probably these are figures in hindsight anyway.
Councillor Cowan or Ali, one of you want to respond?
I'm going to pass that ball very quickly to the officer sitting, as I look at her, on my left on my screen. Ali, would you please answer that one?
Thank you. Yes, the revenue funding is not used very often. The reason it's halved is because we committed to some broadband funding, around about £1 million, and that was a one-off. So hence the roughly halving of the value.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for the team?
Councillor Crane.
Thank you. Councillor Crane.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Yes, the 0.01% interest that you can get in the bank, I would be interested to know, being as we have all these assets, which is wonderful, what the average percentage income across the board is for the assets that we own in comparison to the 0.01% that we would get if the money was in the bank, so to speak. Thank you.
I'm sure Councillor Cowan would love to answer that one.
Well, yes, I can do to an extent. It rather varies which asset we're talking about. But as our leader said a little while ago, we hold significant assets across the district, operating in different ways. And we have, as Councillor Hewitt, if he was here, would be able to tell you, set a strategy for what income stream we might expect from each of those assets. And that ranges from between 3 and 5% up to 8 and 9% on the capital effectively that we have invested in the buildings. So there is a significant increase, potential and real, to increase our revenue stream through holding assets in property, even now in these pandemic times. And we are seeing more and more inquiries coming in, and we will continue to invest in our district in order to enable us to grow and provide employment and see a way out of the pandemic through further growth and investment throughout Breckland. Thank you for that question.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other names on my chat box, so I'm going to go back to item 9, where there are 2 recommendations.
Thank you, Chairman. May I move those recommendations?
You can.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, Councillor Applewell had his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Attewell. Hasn't come up on my screen.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Cowan, for the report. Could I just, and I hear what you're saying about investments in property portfolios, but do you agree that there is obviously a certain amount of risk in any of those investments in property portfolio, assuming that we've got tenants that are in a position to pay us the rent when it's due?
It is a very sensible question. And yes, any investment, whoever makes it in whatever way, carries a risk. However, that's why we do have analysis carried out by our property team. I'm stepping on Councillor Hewitt's toes a little bit here, but I know he isn't with us. But they do undertake full risk assessment prior to investing. Of course, most of our investments were invested pre-COVID. So the events of the last 12 months were completely unforeseen, and had they been part of a risk analysis at the time, would have probably showed a very low risk of occurrence, notwithstanding the fact that on any risk register it might have been a medium to high risk in the event that they occurred. But as you'll be aware, when we undertake risk assessments and evaluations, we look at likelihood and impact. And I think the likelihood would have been low, and the impact, depending on the investment, would have been medium to high. So as a consequence, I have no problem with our investment portfolio. But looking ahead, clearly we have to be very mindful of the type of businesses in which we invest. And for that purpose, Councillor Hewitt and his team are actually taking sound advice as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just check with Julie and Teresa? We've got no other questions.
Councillor Borrett.
All right, so my chat screen's frozen, so I'm relying on you two now. Councillor Borrett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to make the point that there is risk to any form of investment, even putting money in the bank, as is being acknowledged by the financial crash in 2007. There is also a huge risk to Breckland services if we do not get the investment income that we use, which is millions of pounds every year, to support the services that Breckland offers. And if we were just to leave all of Breckland's investments in the bank, as the cabinet member very eloquently announced earlier on, the return of 10p and £1,000 would massively reduce the income that the council has to fund those services. So a balance of risk and reward is one I would heartily support. And I think that the risk profile of bricks and mortar assets that are based in Norfolk is something that the council and all members have had the opportunity to vote on many times. And it has been the considered wish of this council that we do hold a property portfolio that does produce income that is used to pay for the services for Breckland's residents. And I'm very interested to notice, because Breckland has been doing this for a very number of years, it's that Norwich City Council, which obviously is run by the Labour Party, is embarked on a far more risky strategy of borrowing money to invest in property in order to get a return from it. And they are saying that they can get a higher return than the cost of borrowing the money to buy the assets. Now, what I will say is that Breckland's assets are being funded from its own capital, and therefore, if there is any borrowing, it's to do with improving that capital, but it wasn't used to fund the original purchases. So the residents of Breckland are in a really unique position, and that is that this council years and years ago took this decision, and that is one of the reasons why Breckland has the lowest district council tax of any district council in the country. It's because we're able to fund services from our property portfolio. So I absolutely endorse the strategy of the cabinet member. And as I say, he is only following the decision of members in the past that Breckland actually adopt this policy. So I endorse the report, Madam Chairman.
Madam Chairman, if I could also just subtly nuance Councillor Borrett's comments there. When I took on this portfolio, I knew very little about finance in local government. And of course, it became very, very clear to me that our support of our services is entirely reliant on revenue stream and not capital. And as a consequence of that, our decision to invest our capital in bricks and mortar effectively, to a large extent, has actually given us a revenue stream which enables us to pay for our services that we provide to residents. We're not allowed to use our capital to pay for the waste collection services and other services we provide. And of course, more recently, central government in their latest announcement that came out with the settlement at the back end of last year have really tightened the screws on the ability of local government to borrow money to invest for growth. We don't have to do that, as Councillor Borrett has said, because our capital is our capital. It isn't borrowed money that we've been investing. And as a consequence, for me, it's a win-win. It's a win-win for our residents too, because as a result of that, we've been able to deliver a balanced budget going forward into this next year against the most horrendous conditions that any local government may well have faced in recent history. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? I'm relying on my officers now to tell me, because
I see no hands up.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going back to item 9. Two recommendations have been proposed. Do I have a seconder for those?
Councillor Borrett.
Thank you. And all those in favour, raise your hand very clearly. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, Julie?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Right, now I'm moving on to the 5 recommendations under item 10, which I want to take on block.
May I move those, please, Chairman?
You may. May I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson. Again, if all of those in favour, raise your hands clearly. All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, Julie?
Thank you,
So
Madam Chairman.
all those recommendations are passed now. Now moving on to item 11. Am I right, Mark? Yes. Nominations for committee and any other seats, if any. Councillor Clausen?
No, Madam Chairman, I have no nominations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 12, I'm not aware of any amendments to the Constitution. And item 13, I have no other business that has been decided as urgent. So we've reached the end of the meeting, and thank you all very much for your contributions. I hope the people zooming in enjoyed it. Please keep safe, keep well, look after each other and your communities. And it's hoped that by the next council meeting, many of us will have had our first vaccinations. Thank you. I declare this meeting